Hello, everybody. Please know that the session will be recorded. We're about to start, and good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining. I am Shilpa Aluwalia, Regional Director, Global Pro Bono, and I, along with my colleagues at Pixera Global India, welcome you today at the India Circularity Summit. Each of us here today because we sense an urgency. We each sense this urgency because we know that there is no alternative to sustainable development. To balance the adverse effects of rapid urbanization, industrialization, growing population, and climate change, it is imperative to imbibe circularity in our economic development in India and across the globe. The summit was conceptualized to unpack this and more. The summit runs across 2 days, today being the first and June 24th being the second. To deepen the discussion and to attempt to shift the narrative from endless conversations to action, we have brought together panelists who are thought leaders, subject matter experts, and leaders in their own sectors. The first panel today will help frame the problem to develop a systemic view of the environmental challenge which goes beyond waste and recycling. At the second panel discussion, we will take stock of ESG and net zero in India and its implications for Indian companies and how, therefore, to make CSR more strategic. To dwell further on the vision for the summit, I would like to introduce Vishnu Swaminathan, who is presently the strategic advisor at Pixera Global. Vishnu has spent in both the for-profit and non-profit sectors. Earlier in his career, he co-founded 2 internet technology companies in Singapore. He has worked with the global nonprofit Ashoka in its global leadership team for over a decade. He co-founded the Indian Housing Federation, which enabled the creation of over 15,000 affordable homes across India. And his work on malnutrition led to the creation of the Nourishing Schools Foundation. And therefore, he rightfully described himself as a lifelong entrepreneur. Vishnu, welcome, and handing this over to you to set us rolling with the summit message.
Thank you, Shilpa. It's such a delight to be here this afternoon and evening for many of you. I really wanted to take this opportunity to welcome every one of you, even amidst all the pandemic and a lot of Zoom webinars and Microsoft Team meetings. Still, you're giving us an opportunity to be with all of you. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I just wanted to start by talking to you a little bit and introducing Pixera Global as an organization. So Pixera Global has been around for 32 years. It was originally started in Washington, DC and doing USAID projects. So the key strength of Pixera Global is to work with companies. So the idea of exposing companies, senior leaders to social change and community activities was the one which Pixera Global led and still continues to lead for 3 decades. The mission of Pixera Global is what really attracted me, and I just want to share it with all of you. Says solving the world's most pressing problems, one community at a time. So as we were discussing this, we looked at what are these pressing social problems a community would face. And of course, there are many, right? Livelihoods, agriculture, food, everything comes into it, environment, climate change. But we zeroed in also on the topic of circularity. So circularity is an interesting topic because it takes really a wholesome view, like what Shilpa mentioned about being really not, not being casual about waste, not being casual about what happens to the things that we use, not being casual about the idea of consumption, what are we really consuming, and many other facets of circularity. So as we wanted to get into circularity, my conversation with my grandmother was quite interesting. So I was just casually talking to her and she said, what do you do? And I kind of brought this idea of circularity in a way that she would understand. She's 97 years old. She said, that's kind of how we lived all our lives. What is so new about it? So that kind of, gave me an insight by saying maybe there's nothing new about it. And maybe this is a topic where there's absolutely nothing wrong in going back into how we all used to live in the past. So maybe that is circularity from a dimension of my grandmother. And we wanted to explore this further by saying, what is circularity and what does it mean? And we're still in the beginning days of questions and asking more questions. So here are some questions as we explore circular economy in the next few days, and maybe next Friday is when we will all come back again to discuss. So how circularity can change our individual lives for the better? What do we scale, and how do we scale amazing successes at a community level to a continental level? We need to look at changing mindsets of individuals, collectives, communities, and nations, and how are we going to do that? How do we see ESG, net zero, circularity all work together and not be seen as independent initiatives? How can we all embrace positivity amidst all the challenging news we hear about climate change, pandemic, resources getting depleted, etc.? And what are the actionable steps that we can take? So that's kind of where I would invite all of us to share these questions, keep some of these questions in mind as we listen to others, and also look at what can we do on our individual level. So without much ado, I really wanted to welcome Wilma. We're really thrilled to have Wilma. Wilma is, been working in the field of waste and net zero for almost 2 decades now. A past journalist, it gave up her career and kind of took waste as a sort of a life calling. So she's also a social entrepreneur and also a CEO of a social enterprise. So true hybrid combination of how an NGO and a social enterprise can be run. So she set it up in 2001 and as a business in 2013. So they're trying to look at how 96% of all the landfills can be recovered. And today they manage around 100 tons of waste per day. Maybe the numbers have changed as we speak, Wilma. So thank you so much, Wilma, for joining us. We're delighted and honored and privileged to have you with us. So let me pass the mic to you, Wilma, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you so much, Wilma. Looks like we suddenly lost Wilma. So maybe we'll hold on for a few seconds till Wilma is able to connect back. The challenges of technology, I guess. So one of the other things I wanted to mention is that as a token of appreciation, we have around 10 to 15 speakers over the next, next few hours, and also on the 24th, we decided to, send them a small gift, but not to them, but a small contribution from our side. So what we have dedicated to do is we are planting 5 trees for each of the speakers with Reforest India. So Reforest India is committed to plant these trees within a 300-kilometer radius of Bangalore. So they would actually assure that the trees would be planted, taken care, and also made sure that they flourish. So we're really thrilled to work with Reforest India in this initiative.
Yeah, thank you. And, really good that I have this opportunity to share with you, thoughts on circular economy and a regenerative economy, because, these are subjects that are really close to us. We're working very hard on these subjects to bring action on the ground. So I thought I would just, share with you a very relevant a thought process, which I think is good for the discussion today, which actually goes back 2000 years plus, because it is taken from the Upanishads. I am what is my deep driving desire. As is my desire, so is my intention. As is my intention, so is my deed. And as is my deed, so is my destiny. So today we are all, here today with a common desire, and that is the circular economy. And when you look at the destiny that we've got to all of us reach together, there is a lot of intent that has to move to action on the ground. So if we just take a step back and look at the world economy, in 2020, it was estimated to be about $84 trillion. And actually, the World Economic Forum brings attention to the fact that 50% of this, or the equivalent of $44 trillion, actually came from nature, came in the form of our food, in the form of our clothing, our houses, our homes, raw material for manufacturing. Nature has always given us, to all the species on the planet, this abundance in its generosity. And we here today as human beings are called upon to give back in a measure which is far more than what we have given back today. So it's really each one of us has this responsibility as human beings, but then we need leadership. And in looking for the leadership, we are looking at industry. We're looking at industry to take us now through to move us from what was a linear system now to a circular system. And industry actually has brought in a lot of measures in the last 10, 15 years. And I'd just like to focus on the triple bottom line that industry has put efforts in terms of planet, people, and profits. But I'd like to bring attention to the report card, because really we need to see what kind of action has happened on the ground. And when you look therefore at planet, and you look at the current discussions that are happening, given the scale of the problems that we have around us, we see the focus a little skewed, I would say, because the focus is on zero emissions. Net zero is becoming, a term that is being used extensively. But this is not enough. This is far from enough, because what we also need to focus on is our reduction in consumption. We need to look at the fact that our whole GDP needs to be restructured. We cannot have materials being used, extracted, deforestation taking place, and that whole system which was there in the past, because today the structuring of the GDP should be around the other end of the other part of the circle, which is repair, reuse, refill, lend, borrow, swap. These are the businesses now that should get far more attention, far more trust than it has had previously. And then when you look at the people aspect, again, we've done reasonably well, I would say, when you look at poverty levels having fallen down. But then there is the question of inequality, and that inequality which is growing, which is corrosive, which is, we've seen it now even in the pandemic, the number of billionaires in India going up 18% from the previous year. We're now at about 166 billionaires. And how are we going to address this? We see great resistance, I would say, or not enough of work done around bringing in more equitable distribution of resources. So we would look now to drastic changes taking place. Can we look at a wealth tax? And I think the World Economic Forum rightly is bringing that subject up. We should be looking at capping CXO salaries so that there is a greater trust to professions which are related to circular economy. And finally, when we come to profits, I think in the 21st century, it's not enough for us to look at balance sheets alone and only financial reporting. It will have to be that audited statements today should include the environmental and the social numbers that any business brings. So we would therefore need to see more of that coming, more of the audited environmental and social change that is there in the business reflected in the numbers. And for that, I'm very, it's really good to see ESG taking pretty much a strong hold around change in mindsets and thinking. But even ESG will have to have this, the disclosures, the greater sincerity, and the intent moving to action as we disclose, as we move towards a better ESG framework. And this is where I come to waste, because that's an area that I have worked in for quite a few years now, 20 plus years. And today, when you look at the importance of the ESG framework and what is the expectation on that reporting. So in the urban situation, we have 40% of municipal solid waste, that is paper, plastic, metal, glass, organic waste, etc., coming from so-called bulk generators. These are the corporate campuses, these are the institutions. And so when you have reporting happening, we'd like to see detailed reporting around how much of efforts have been put towards reduce. Are we still using paper cups? Are we still using water bottles? I mean, this needs to be reported. Then you need to see how much of organic waste is actually going into compost or going into biogas. And you have great technologies now to enable that to happen. And then you have the dry waste, which is paper, plastic, metal, glass. How much of that is being recovered for recycling, and how much of that is being diverted into a landfill? So today the expectation is that all our entities, all our corporate campuses, all our residences should not be sending less than 10% of the total waste should go out into a landfill. And that's where organizations like us really have come in. Sahas Zero Waste has been working to give opportunities to bulk generators, give opportunities to companies, to brands, to residences to really pay attention to their waste. So we believe we are a 21st century company because for us, it is first about people and planet, and profits come a little bit lower down in our list of priorities. And that's why also our business model is structured around ensuring that really the grades of waste which do not bring economic value are the grades of waste that we put high priority towards managing. So just a quick word about our business model. Our first vertical is the zero waste vertical, which looks at, just a minute, working with campuses to enable them to become zero waste. And the generators themselves are expected to invest in infrastructure so that they will reach that target of maximum resource recovery. The second vertical is our EPR vertical, where we work with brands, with packaging companies, with brands who have a lot of packaging, plastic packaging, and then the electronic waste, end-of-life producers, etc. We enable them to take back their post-consumer or their end-of-life material so that it goes into recycling. And then the third vertical is around bringing back waste into products. So we work with a lot of SHGs, etc., to produce upcycled products, and then that goes back into our customers, and that's how we close the loop. Our two big challenges, which I would like to flag off at this point, is that in the first place, we see, like for instance, last year, we were able to collect 19,000 tons of plastic from about 40 different locations in India across 20 different states. Recovery of plastic is a pretty intensive operational exercise. And obviously, as a company, we would need to, we look to have maximum recovery, maximum resources recovered. But if you look at what we are able to do across India in terms of recycling, plastic recycling in India, the infrastructure is really not there. So whilst we were able to collect, aggregate, compact all of this plastic, 94% of it actually went for energy recovery and for co-processing in a cement kiln. And just 6% of it went into recycling. So that's the kind of gap that we need to bridge with a lot of more attention, companies, brands, putting capital into research, not just in pilot projects, but in projects and recycling that happens on the ground. And at the next, big challenge that we have really is around social aspects and the workforce working with waste. We as an organization, we have about 300 people working with us, out of which 65% are women. 250 people are from the base of the pyramid, our field team, and we ensure that they work formally, that they are given minimum wages, access to social security. But the sector, the waste sector has 95% of its workforce working informally, working without a contract, working in really exploitative conditions, working with no minimum wages. And this is something that we can easily change, because if waste is going to bring such a big livelihood opportunity, then that livelihood must come with dignity. It must come with people being able to afford be able to have their basic needs. And the only reason why we are not able to do that, I mean, I may be sounding a bit simplistic in looking at it as the main reason for not being able to do this, is because people are still clinging on to things like incentives. So, why should I segregate my waste? I need an incentive. I need, even at a household level, to be paid for my newspapers, and at a corporate level to be paid for my scrap waste. And this monies are going in the direction of the consumer at the expense of a better livelihood for people working with waste. So today, as we, as I said, come together and discuss circularity, I've put on the table a few of the critical issues that are there for us to really move that intent to action and to our destiny. I hope that I would be able to engage with some of you at a later stage, so that we can kind of have more intense discussions and really make those changes that are needed on the ground. Thank you, and I look forward to being in touch.
Thank you, Wilma. Thank you so much for a crisp but really a well-rounded conversation around what you do, and at the same time your vision. So there are a couple of questions which are coming up from the audience as well as from us. So maybe can I just kick it off with a couple of questions, Wilma? So
Sure,
the first
please,
question from Omkar talks a little bit about how do we do circular economy on chemicals, right? Obviously, chemicals are extracted, produced, not bio created. So what is your sense about it? Because you talked a little bit about plastics, but chemicals in general.
Yeah, so a lot of the chemicals can also be, there could be even chemicals coming out of industry. Where can it be reused? Has industry put enough of attention to seeing, how much of it can be reused? Because obviously that again is a lot of operations, and it is easier for you today to put chemicals into a lake, into a stream. To a large extent, that is being called out quite significantly. But then the other option is burying it in the ground, whereas we would want it, if it cannot come into a closed loop system, then it cannot be in our system. So we can find alternatives for chemicals, and if it has to be there in the system, then research has to happen so that it goes back into reuse and not into the ground or into the lake. It can be done, and it should be done.
Great. So actually this connects to a remark which you made earlier about recovery, right? So, you talked about plastics recovery and how 94% of the plastics actually went back to, cement or, the construction industry per se. So the general, reaction to circular economy at this point of time is the cost of this recovery versus the cost of production itself, right? Because the systems of production have become so efficient that we produce plastics really at a very negligible cost right now. That's probably why we are using so much plastic. So how do we balance this, question of recovery costs versus the cost of production?
Yeah, and that is something that has to be answered by industry, and that's the reason why we are saying that look, we need to have our GDP restructured. We need to put people and planet above profits, because today when you look at what that mindset has done to our environment and to a large number of people, the overall benefits of what we have done is just enjoyed by a very small number of people. So obviously it's going to come at a cost, and that cost can definitely be borne by industry if there is the externalities always included in the cost. And that is the whole restructuring of business that has to take place. You've got so many models. You've got, the economists of the 21st century are people like Kate Raworth, bringing to us donut economics. So let's measure what is the impact that all our businesses have. And if you look at how we can take measures to step back and make corrective make the relevant corrections, it can happen. Look at the fact that even in the food industry, the amount of waste that comes out even at the manufacturing level. And so why are we producing so much? Why are we discarding things which just have that slight blemish in it? Why are so much of expired foods? Why are we producing that much just because it's cheaper to produce more than to have less? So of course these are difficult questions, but there is that total overhaul that needs to be made if we have to make changes on the ground. And just to again bring attention to plastic waste, the fact is that over all of these years, 50 years, we've been told that plastic can be recycled. And we know that it can't be recycled. And in all these years, just 7% or 8% of plastic around the world has actually been recycled. Yeah. So why has there been no upfront information going out to the consumer, like you've been doing so much of advertising? Let's hear the truth and let the consumer then decide. And there are enough of consumers now that want to know and want to do the right thing. Let's together nudge ourselves to do the right thing.
Yeah. So actually, a couple of questions have come in, Wilma, and one is surrounding toxicity of chemicals, right? And also plastics to some large extent, where there are so many things which are toxic even in regular plastics. So when we kind of, go into either recycling those plastics or reusing those, obviously the BOP is involved in segregation and kind of, handling those. And at the same time, so one is how do we protect the people who are handling those toxic levels which are present in this waste, which I'm sure you are doing it on a daily basis because you handle so much of waste every day. And the second is obviously when we reuse some of these toxic chemicals, which were not meant to be used in places, then microplastics and all of these things are also creating a problem. So what is your view on this, the toxicity of stuff?
Yeah, so at the manufacturing level, toxicity is kind of taken care of. And that is the same attention that we would like. If your plastic is got all of those elements in it, then there needs to be the same attention. The factory, the shop floor, the the attention to workers, all of that given to now closing the loop. And that has not happened. We've, as I said, 95% of waste, including recycling, is taking place in the informal sector, where the informal sector has been left more or less just by themselves to do what they can do to retrieve so that they can earn some livelihood. Many of them are willing to move to more formal systems, and we are working with a handful of people, but there is too much of work to be done, and that's where industry, along with manufacturing, it's equally a responsibility for them to improve the recycling.
And a quick question from one of our audiences is, what is your scale, Wilma? I talked a little bit about 100 tons of waste every day, but what's your real scale, and how hungry is SARS? That's a question. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are at 100 tons. Bangalore itself generates about 5,000 tons per day. So that's the gap. India generates 62 million tons a year. We are in a good position to scale because, we've done a lot of work, our processes, our operations, we can really scale at a much faster rate, but we want to keep the impact in terms of environmental and social. And therefore, our business model is revenues from waste and revenues from a service fee. And our biggest challenge is, even for big brands and even for large corporate campuses in Bangalore, to pay us a service fee that will meet the cost of our entire operations. I keep having this conversation with CEOs, and the moment there is a differential cost between what they're paying today versus what it would cost to have a holistic operation, we get pushed down to facility managers, we get pushed down to procurement, and no systems in place to align procurement with circularity.
Yeah.
So there's a big gap there.
So Wilma, in your opinion, who should bear the extra cost of becoming circular? Obviously, the companies are not going to bear their cost themselves because they want to recover their costs. So eventually, the question is, Saroj asked from KPMG, is this costs are going to trickle down anyway to the consumer? So as Indian consumers, at large, or customers, how are we ready to embrace such higher costs for the same thing? It's like almost going organic is more expensive than the real one, so people don't choose to go organic, right? So who, in your opinion, who should take these costs, and how should these costs be handled?
Yeah, the costs are not that much in the first place. Even when you look at waste management services, it is like, as much as a dining out experience, the delta would be, a single night out dining, that kind of cost that we're talking in terms of waste. But otherwise, I'm sure the consumer has to pay. That's where we will reduce our consumption, but that's where there will be new business models which are coming out, where the consumer will pay, he will reduce his consumption, but he will also take responsibility for his post-consumer waste as well.
Sure. So one common question which came from a couple of people is, how is your work on textiles, right? So because textiles is probably a little bit easier to handle the harmful toxic stuff from other parts. So what is your experience with textiles, and how do you see it?
Yeah, so plastic waste has got so much of attention, and rightly so. And I think we are on some track to making changes there. But we seem to forget that even textiles is at the end of the day 90% plastic. With the blends that are there, all our polymers, in our textiles, and no real serious efforts to bring that textiles back, to make sure there is recycling. The work has just started, but very, very small. Given the size of the problem, we really want to see all the brands put their heads together and, support business models of swap. Lending, borrowing, swapping. We don't need to, each one of us, perhaps many of you would know that one pair of jeans to produce uses 10,000 liters of water. Wow. So shouldn't we be making that a lifetime, apparel that we have? Each one of us doesn't need more than one in our lifetime. So we just take it around till it, it cannot be used anymore. But we see it coming into our systems every day. A lot of apparel which definitely has a much longer life than that 1 year average that is being used. So I would like to see far more attention, the consumer, the customer, making sure that swap becomes the way forward, and having business models around it.
So Wilma, last question to you. Probably we'll share some of the other questions which we couldn't get to you by email, so you can take a look at it. So the last question is, you talked a little bit earlier about, this whole attitude of consumeristic mindset, right? The more, the better.
Sorry, which movement?
The consumeristic mindset,
Yeah,
right? We want to be
yeah.
consumers. We keep
Yes,
consuming and, owning a
yes,
lot of
yes,
things. So what does your magic wand look like, Wilma? If you had a magic wand, how does it look like? What do we do, to change people at scale as far as mindsets are concerned towards this attitude of, wanting more and more things?
I think that has come about obviously by advertising to a large extent. I mean, what is it, what is our lifestyle is kind of shown to us through, advertising. So I would like to see industry now do reverse advertising, where they define what is conscious consumption, where they push us into, not just buying, but the other way around, to valuing what we have. So that is, and then all of us pay the price, the real price, not a price which somebody else is paying, or the environment or nature is paying. I think we can get there, but again, a lot of spotlight on industry. We'd like to see far more, messaging going around conscious consumption.
Wilma, thank you so much for your time. Though you had a little bit of challenge technologically, I think we sorted it out. And I really wanted to thank all the people who have joined us also for the patience for those few minutes when you were not able to join. So really appreciate all the comments that you've shared. And it has spurred a lot of questions from many people in the audience. So we're going to take some of those questions also in the next 1 or 2 panels as we discuss, Wilma. But really, sincerely appreciate your time and efforts to be with us today. And like I mentioned earlier, so 5 trees will grow in your name. So thank you so much, Wilma.
Thank you.
And
All the best
yeah,
for the
thank
meeting.
you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Wilma.